Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit, hosted in Pretoria, South Africa, Forbes Africa editor Renuka Methil had a one-on-one conversation on the sideline with Arunma Oteh, Chairperson of the Royal African Society and recently awarded the Forbes Woman Africa Changemaker of the Decade Award, about her journey, Africa's prospects and position on the global stage, and her recently published book, All Hands on Deck, Unleash Prosperity Through World-Class Capital Markets.
Arunma Oteh, what an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us. You've come all the way from Oxford to attend the 10th edition of the Forbes Woman Africa Leading Women Summit, where you're going to be doing an entire conversation, a one-on-one interview on stage. What an honor to have you here. And what I love is the fact that you've just released All Hands on Deck. This was released at Oxford for Arunma's 60th birthday, and this was in January. So there's a lot to talk about. Yeah. So I will let you start, Arunma, this book and then your trip.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have to commend you and the Forbes Africa team for this Women Leadership Summit. As you know, I wanted to come 2 years ago and last year, and last minute I couldn't make it, so I promised that I would come this year, and I know that this year, given the lineup, is absolutely going to be phenomenal. So thank you very much for all that you do for society and for the continent of Africa. And this Women Leadership Summit is one of the hallmarks of the International Women's Month. So thank you very much. So I celebrate you and your team, first of all. About the book, All Hands on Deck. I'm sure you'll agree with me that, despite all of the progress the world has seen in the last century, that it almost seems as if we're turning back the hands of the clock. There's still poverty. 70% of the poorest people live on the African continent. 27 countries out of the 30 poorest countries in the world are on the African continent. Africa, in my view, is the wealthiest continent, but has the poorest people. And I continue to ask myself, what is that answer to solving the problem of making sure that the entire world can live a good life? And it comes back to me time and time again, is that we have to build world-class capital markets. And the reason I say we have to build all world-class capital markets is that it requires, we have huge funding gaps. Just take infrastructure. And South Africa is doing better than most African countries. People estimate that it's anything from $100 billion to $200 billion that we need annually to address infrastructure. 600 million people in Africa don't have access to electricity. So you can go on and on about what needs to be done. We have 5 years to the date that we set for addressing the Sustainable Development Goals, and we need about $3.5 trillion to be able to get there annually. And so we need lots of money. And what capital markets do is provide money. Domestic capital markets provide money in the domestic markets, but also globally. And some of the countries that have done really well, whether it's the US, whether it's China, whether it's some European countries, have leveraged their capital markets. And so that's why I make a case for why we have to focus much better on building world-class capital markets. So it's about money, but it's more than money. Because one of the things and you cover a lot of people in Forbes Africa who deal in the capital markets, is that it's beyond money. So in addition to financing, there's also that it's a meritocracy. Money goes to the companies that are doing better. You can get jobs. Governments can solve their problems, whether in infrastructure, in education, in health, by leveraging the capital markets. Companies can issue in the capital markets. Individuals can create wealth by investing in the capital markets.
So, you know, the heart of economic reform for any country or even for the continent, it really is the capital markets. I mean, for economic and social transformation. And you have led in various roles. You've led these the financial sector in many ways. I just want to come back to that. But before that, I just want to go back, not a little back actually, to the age of when you were 8 years old in Abuja and your parents taught you financial literacy. They initiated you on this path. Can you just take, and you do refer to it in your book. It's a great anecdote. I love reading about it. Just take us back to that time when you were a little child and what actually stirred this interest.
By the way, one of my friends said that before she read the book, she knew I was going to make a case for capital markets because she said I started my career as an 8-year-old in the capital markets. So, and since I've remained there for most of my life, that she had no doubt that that was what the case was going to be. But for me, I consider myself extremely fortunate to have had parents who invested in me learning about finance from a very young age. So the story that that I've often shared is that, you know, after dinner, my father would make me read the annual reports of companies that he and my mother had invested in the Nigerian capital markets. They were both civil servants, and so didn't make very much money. And so to pay for my education and the education of my siblings, they invested in the capital markets. They used dividends, they used capital appreciation, and they were not financially, they were not financial gurus. And I explained this to say that everyone can invest in the capital markets. They focused on, the businesses that all of us are familiar with, the Nestle's, the Unilevers of the world. And we would go through the dividends that they had earned every now and again. And so for me, even though at the beginning, at that time, I thought, oh my God, this big documents, and we had many paper copies at the time, were probably, I would grumble about having to read this after dinner. But basically, it started my career in finance. But I make a more general case about the importance of financial literacy because I believe that finance is life. I believe that the disciplines that finance teaches around budgeting, around saving, around investing are really about life. Think about it. Delay gratification for today so that you can enjoy benefits in the future. That's what life is all about. Yes. So for me, one of the cases I make in the book is around governments investing in financial literacy, in financial education. Standard & Poor's did a survey recently that basically said 30% of adults around the world are not financially literate. And the numbers are actually worse in developing countries and in certain specific countries on the African continent.
And they're also financially excluded to a large extent, unbanked, underbanked, underserved.
Absolutely. But the starting point is financial capability. Yes, it's harder for you to be financially included if you're not familiar. And I do make the case that you have to catch people young. It should be in the curriculum. Yes, from primary school, from secondary school, absolutely. When I was at the SEC, we did make sure that working with primary schools, secondary schools, and universities in Nigeria, that there was a shift in the curriculum. We also had programs which we call the Catch Them Young programs, where we had national competitions so that young people could focus on learning about finance, understanding finance, and learning about investing in the stock markets.
True. And a lot of the time, I feel the capital markets itself, they're quite misunderstood. And there's not much of an awareness of what how you can leverage off capital markets. And I just want to go back again a little bit to 2009, when you came in from Tunisia and you landed in Abuja. Again, you mentioned that in your book. And this was, after the global financial crisis, and you had to completely turn around the Nigerian capital market. You took over as the Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission. What were your thoughts at that point? I mean, as a woman in a so-called male-dominated arena, how did you take on that challenge? What was the strength that motivated you to go beyond, above and beyond?
Well, first of all, I recognized, so I'd spent 17 years of my career working in development banking. I covered African countries in North and West Africa. I'd also basically helped the African Development Bank raise money around the world, from the Americas to Asia. I'd also, I managed some books in the trading room. I ran the dollar portfolio. I even ran portfolios pre-euro. There was a Dutch mark portfolio. There was a peseta portfolio. And I said to myself that I would love an opportunity to go home and contribute to what was happening in Nigeria. Right. And the opportunity to be the head of the Nigerian capital markets regulator was, for me, a very important one, because it was post the global financial crisis. All the markets in the world were doing really poorly. As you may know, the global financial crisis started with a subprime crisis in America, but it affected the entire world, which showed the interconnectivity of various markets. And Nigeria, pre that time, had seen markets that had been evolving positively. Retail investors were investing in the markets and were enjoying the dividends of investing in the markets. There were some market abuses that were particularly Nigeria-focused, which emanated from a whole reform in the banking sector. So what you had was investors who were very excited about, oh my God, I could basically invest and make money. So people stopped focusing on investing, in my view, and instead focusing on gambling. A friend of mine said that when a taxi driver told him that he could invest in the stock of a bank, that's when he thought, I need to get out of the market, because this guy is telling me that he's invested in this bank stock, yet he doesn't think that he's financially literate enough to understand what it takes. And there were market abuses, there was pump and dump, there were wash sales, there were all kinds of things happening around the world, but also in Nigeria. So I walked into, first of all, trying to make sure that investors who had lost confidence because they'd then lost a lot of money would return to the market, because the hallmark of a world-class capital market is one that promotes investor confidence, one where people feel that when they put in their money, that money is safe, that they wouldn't lose it because somebody's trying to scam them of their money. So for me, that was significant. Also significant was understanding, as I said, the importance of capital markets to an economy. I think that prior to me joining, we'd lost the focus on the understanding of the value of capital markets to an economy. And so working with the central bank, working with the Ministry of Finance, working with the Ministry of Agriculture and other ministries to create what is an ecosystem of a new focus on the capital markets was pretty significant. But also important was really to make sure that if people did wrong, that they were brought to book. And that hadn't been seen in our market. And you always have a village that helps you do things. So we couldn't, as SEC, do it ourselves. So we essentially worked with the police, worked with the Department of Public Prosecutions. And so when we did anything like the Ponzi schemes that existed in the market, we went with police. And so people knew we're serious. But we also set in place mechanisms where people would disgorge illegally made profits. We would refund investors of funds that they'd been scammed off. And so gradually, people started to see
And
that
sort of
this market
believing in
was
it.
absolutely believing in the market again. But also the market was also not as diversified as it should be. It was a market that was predominantly banking stock on the equities side. On the fixed income side, most companies were not issuing bonds in the market. It was really the government that was issuing, and the government had done a very good job in establishing a yield curve, a tenure that was significantly deep, but the corporate bond market didn't exist. We also encouraged a number of investors not to invest directly, but to think about investing through collective investment schemes, whether mutual funds or exchange-traded funds. So we approved the rules for that. Most importantly, the stock exchanges are the visible symbol of any capital market. And so cleaning up the stock exchange was extremely important. Approving the establishment of other stock exchanges was extremely important, and something that I'm very, very proud of the Nigerian market participants is that what is now FMDQ, which is a full-scale exchange, actually came to us as the SEC to seek approval, regulatory approval, because they understood the credibility of having a regulatory approval for their market. So today Nigeria has the Nigerian Group Exchange, formerly the Nigerian Stock Exchange, FMDQ, and NASD, which basically is an exchange for unlisted securities.
So you were with them, with the SEC for 5 years.
Yes.
Surely you've left an enduring and lasting legacy. And then you left to join the World Bank. So 20 years of your 40-year career has been in development banks around the world. How has that experience been like? And you still remain attached to all of these entities. You're an academic now at Oxford. You're the chair of the Royal African Society. I really don't know how you do everything, but just take us through what you actually did for continental growth, and you continue to in your various roles to actually promote continental growth.
I'll respond in several parts. So first of all, to work for a development bank, there's some of the greatest jobs on earth.
Yes.
So I had the opportunity to work for the African Development Bank, providing funding to North and West African countries. I had the opportunity to work in corporate finance and raise funds around the world for the African Development Bank to be able to lend to African countries. I worked in the trading room and then ran the trading room, and so was able to manage a team of portfolio managers. It's also one of the greatest jobs to be treasurer of the World Bank. So I was the 12th treasurer of the World Bank, and we now have a 14th treasurer since its founding in 1944. And the World Bank is a phenomenal institution. The African Development Bank is a phenomenal institution, the Asian Development Bank. And the reason that they're phenomenal is the business model. You've got these organizations that are a cooperation of countries. Shareholders are the shareholders are countries who come together, and on the back of them coming together, they raise money at the cheapest levels. They're AAA rated, and they're able to lend to the poorest countries in the world who may not be rated. And those countries are consistent in paying them back. Because of course, your ranking with these organizations determine how people perceive you as a country. So that business model of cooperation between countries around the world. So the World Bank is owned by 189 countries, is also significant. The other thing that's also significant is that a lot of innovation comes out of these development banks. Everybody today talks about green bonds, but it was multilateral development banks that started the green bond market. The first formal swap was done between the World Bank and IBM, with one wanting Swiss francs and the other wanting dollars. When I was treasurer, we did the first blockchain bond ever. We did the first pandemic bond, of course, reminding me of some of the challenges of Ebola. And so having to be the treasurer that led the first pandemic bond deal was significant. And there are many others. The Sustainable Development Goals, we have bonds that focus on Sustainable Development Goals. So multilateral development banks, innovation, transferring, being able to raise money at reasonable costs so that they can be transferred to the poorest nations, to focus on infrastructure, to focus on education, but also just the bastion of bringing the world together.
Right,
yes, whether it's the African Development Bank or the World Bank or the Asian Development Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank.
And bringing the world together is interesting because that's your role now as chair of the 124-year-old Royal African Society as well. More like a bridge, for cultures. How you've been with them for 4 years now. How has that experience been like? I mean,
it's so I decided starting in 2019 that I will focus more of my work on impact on society, and what better place to be than at the University of Oxford, where through my work I can influence future leaders, whether through research or through teaching. Also honored, as you pointed out, to be the chairperson of the Royal African Society. The Royal African Society was founded 124 years ago, and I believe in 1935 it sought royal charter, and the Queen of England, the late Queen, was the patron, and in 2017, when she was handing over some of her patronage, Prince William became the patron of the Royal African Society. Phenomenal organization because it straddles art, business, culture, politics, and knowledge. It was founded in memory of Mary Kingsley, who basically said that she wanted to promote Africa. She didn't want to preach to Africa. She wanted to learn from Africa. And so the ethos of the organization remains that today. So through where the secretariat to the All Parties Parliamentary Group on Africa, which means that the 200 members of parliament in the UK who do things in Africa, who are interested in Africa, basically work with us to make sure that issues related to Africa are taken account of. So for example, there is a recent inquiry that they started on Africa's perspectives on issues of climate. And this year, we will be launching that report. The most well-known journal on Africa, African Affairs, is actually published by the Royal Africa Society. We have a platform called the Africa Argument, which is a web-based platform which allows African writers and those who write on Africa to have a voice. We have a biannual film festival called Film Africa, and we have an Africa Writes, which is the equivalent of a literary festival. So it's the whole gamut, really, as you said, being a bridge between Africa and the rest of the world.
I mean, I could go on and on, Arunma. There's just a lot to talk about, but I really admire that even at the age of 60, I mean, you have the energy, and I have no idea how you do it all, but here's to many, many, many more years of productive work for Africa and the rest of the world. That was Arunma Oteh. This book, All Hands of Deck, is truly a masterclass on capital markets, but more than anything else, it's a great story of a brilliant mind's journey in Africa.